Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wait, now I can hear you too. Don't need that. Okay, welcome back. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all again. Today, we're going to discuss the legal status of Jerusalem and the land of Israel under both Jewish law and international law. Okay? Who has the title to Jerusalem? And why? Where does the title come from? What's the legal background to the title of Jerusalem? So let's see. First of all, let's see. When you say Jerusalem, you need to, first of all, define Jerusalem. What is Jerusalem? Not just Jerusalem, every city. It has its boundaries. It's set up by maybe the planning committee or the municipality or the king. All right. So let's see. Beit Din sheratzu leosif al Yerushalayim. So Yerushalayim is a city. It has its walls. It has its boundaries. And this is actually very important, specifically considering Yerushalayim, because Yerushalayim has many laws that apply to it that don't apply to other places. For instance, Maaser Sheni, every few years, there's a tenth of all your produce needs to be eaten within the boundaries of Yerushalayim. And there are certain things that aren't allowed to take place within the boundaries of Yerushalayim. So, does that mean that once Jerusalem is built, that's it? Those are the boundaries and it can't expand? How do you decide what the boundaries are? So it says, Beit Din sheratzu leosif al Yerushalayim. They wanted to add to the boundaries of Yerushalayim. They wanted to expand. The population grew over the years. O leosif al ha'azarot. Mosifin, and not just Yerushalayim, but also the Mikdash. The Mikdash itself has its area, right? If you go up to Har HaBayit, so there's like a big platform there, 500 meters by 500 meters, all right? And within that area, there's a certain area that's the area of the Mikdash. Even though it's not currently walled, that area, there's no fences, there's a certain area that's called the Azara, which is the area where you could bring sacrifices and korbanot. Says that area too can be expanded. You could actually turn the whole platform of Har HaBayit into the Azara. If there's enough people that we need to take advantage of the whole area of the Temple Mount in order to bring korbanot, they can do that. Beit Din can do that. And they can expand the Azara to the full extent wherever they want to on the Temple Mount. And they can also expand the boundaries, the walls of the city, to anywhere that they want to. אין מוסיפין על העיר או על העזרות אלא על פי מלך ועל פי נביא ובאורים ותומים ועל פי סנהדרין של 71 זקנים. Says, however, if you want to expand Jerusalem or expand the boundaries of the temple on Temple Mount, you can only do that with, there needs to be present a king, a prophet, urim v'tumim, the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, and the Supreme Court of 71 judges. All right, so they do this whole procession with all of these people in order to expand the boundaries. As it says, this whole procession that I'm showing you, this is what you should do. This is a procession that God showed Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu, and the legal status of Moshe Rabbeinu, he served as a king. He was in the position of king. And how do you add to the boundaries of the city or the Azarot? You take two Todot, okay? I'll go through this quickly because it's not really the purpose of this class. You take two It's two sacrifices that are based on bread sacrifices, right? And they take the bread and they go, they have this procession, they have this like parade going from the currently sanctified area, expanding it until the edge of where they want to expand the new boundaries. And then over there, they eat that sacrifice, or they eat one of them and they burn the other. All right, and same too with the Azara. If they want to expand not just the walls of the city and the Kiddusha of Yerushalayim to new boundaries, but also the Kiddusha of the Mikdash within the Temple Mount, they do the same procession. It says, in any place, any place that they didn't do this procession according to this prescribed, right, ceremony, lo nitkadesh kiddush gamur. It didn't get the full kiddusha of whether it's expanded borders of Jerusalem, that let's say they build a new neighborhood, right, adjacent to the existing neighborhood of Jerusalem, and they don't have a king or they don't have a prophet and they can't do this procession, right? If they didn't do this ceremony as prescribed, lo nitkadesh kiddush gamur, it doesn't get this new kiddusha of Harabayit or this new kiddusha of Jerusalem, meaning this new neighborhood, you cannot eat maaser sheni in it. All right, this expanded part of the Temple Mount, which, by the way, a big part of the Temple Mount today is expanded and not the original Temple Mount. It doesn't have the same kiddusha of the rest of the Temple Mount or the Azara. You can't bring korbanot over there. וזה שעשה עזרא שתי תודות, זכר הוא שעשה. Says when Ezra HaSofer came back, he came from Bavel, and he reestablished, right, the Jewish settlement of Jerusalem, and he rebuilt the walls. And then he went and did this procession with the two Todot. Says, לא במעשיו נתקדש המקום שלא היה שם מלך ולא אורים ותומים. He says, this ceremony that Ezra did isn't what sanctified Jerusalem, because there was no king in his days, there was no breastplate. There's debate whether there was prophet or not. Some say he was the prophet. It says, ubemanid kadsha. So therefore, then what sanctified Jerusalem in the days of Ezra, or the temple in the days of Ezra? Bikdusha rishona shekitesha shelomo. It says it still has the first sanctification of Shlomo. When Shlomo inaugurated the temple and Jerusalem, right, that got the Kiddusha, and it never left. It always stayed. Shehu Kiddusha ha'azara v'Yerushalayim nesha'ata, right, that he sanctified the Azara, the temple area within the Temple Mount, and the city of Jerusalem, Nesha'ata, right, then, Vekidesha otan le'atid lavo. And he also sanctified it for the future, forever. All right, these are two different levels of Kedusha. There's a level of Kedusha Nesha'ata in its time, and there is La'atid lavo for eternity, forever, for the future. Okay? Lefichach, it says, therefore, makrivin korbanot kullan, afal pi she'en sham bayit banui. It says, therefore, even though there is no temple standing, the area of the temple is still sanctified, and therefore we still bring korbanot, or we should be bringing korbanot. In the times of Ezra, the temple was not built yet, and they were bringing korbanot within the territory of the Mikdash. Ve'ochnin kodshe kodashim b'chol ha'azara, and you eat the kodashim, right, the product of the korbanot and the whole area of the Azara, of the temple, even though it's destroyed, and it's not, and there's no boundaries to it, there's no walls or gates around the Azara. All right, and the whole area of Yerushalayim, or the area of Yerushalayim in the times of Ezra, right? We should still be bringing Maaser Sheni and eating Maaser Sheni in that area. Even though there's no wall. The wall has been destroyed since then. Because this first inauguration of Yerushalayim and the temple, it was Kiddusha for its time and forever, which is kind of unique because with the rest of the country has a completely different status. It says, ולמה אני אומר במקדש בירושלים שקידושה ראשונה קידשתן לעתיד לבוא? So why do I say specifically regarding the temple area and Jerusalem that its kiddusha was forever, while ובקדושת שאר ארץ ישראל עניין שביעית ומעשורת וחסד בהן, and while the rest of the land of Israel לא קידשה לעתיד לבוא, it wasn't sanctified forever. When they came, right, it's called Oleh Misraim, when they came and they sanctified the cities in the land and they set the boundaries of the country, right, that Kiddusha did not last forever. It was for its time, and eventually it was annulled. The Kiddusha was removed from there. לפי שקדושת המקדש בירושלים מפני השכינה. So he says, why? Because regarding the Mikdash and Jerusalem itself has the same status of the Mikdash. For this instance, the Kiddusha has to do with the Shekhinah, Ushchina Eina Betela. The Shekhinah is never annulled, it's never cancelled. We'll get into the real legal status of why Yerushalayim's Kiddusha lasted forever as opposed to the rest of the country. But let's see what happened with the rest of the country first. אבל חיוב הארץ בשביעית ובמעשרות אינו אלא מפני שהוא כיבוש רבים. He says, however, with the rest of the country, what sanctified the country? It was dependent upon conquest. The people came in, they conquered the lands, kibush rabim. It's for the sake of the people, of the nation. It's a national conquest. However, וכיוון שנלקחה הארץ מידיהם, בטל הכיבוש, ונפטרה מן התורה, מן המעשרות ומן השביעית, שהרי אינה ארץ ישראל. It says, however, once the land was conquered by our enemies, it says, בטל הכיבוש, the conquest has been cancelled, meaning our holding of the land due to conquest no longer exists, and now this land, which is held by foreigners or by our enemies, is no longer considered the land of Israel. And all the laws that apply specifically to the land of Israel no longer apply to those areas. Tirumot and Ma'asrot, right? Shemitah. There's a whole section of laws that apply to, it's called Misvot Shetluyot Ba'aretz, Misvot that are dependent on the land of Israel. They no longer apply. However, the laws that are dependent on Jerusalem do still apply to Jerusalem. So, Kiddusha Rishona is dependent upon conquest. As long as you're holding the land through conquest, the land is yours, and it's considered the land of Israel. Once that conquest was annulled, meaning we were conquered in return, it's no longer called the land of Israel. It's She'ena Eretz Israel. It's no longer Eretz Israel. None of the laws of Eretz Israel apply to it. וכיוון שעלה Ezra וקידשה, however, when Ezra came back after the 70-year exile, the Babylonian exile, when he came back and he founded Jerusalem as a new city again, and they started building cities in the whole area, lo kiddesha bekibush. He didn't sanctify the land through conquest. He had no military, he had no army. Ela b'hazaka shehaziku ba. So what was the source of this kiddusha? It comes from a hazaka. What does hazaka mean? Right? Hazaka, it literally means to hold, meaning they're holding it. But really what it means in Jewish law, hazaka means like title. It's or recognition. How did Ezra come back to Eretz Israel? What happened was the king of Persia recognized Israel and Jerusalem as the homeland of the Jewish people. And that land was within his empire. And he gave a license to the Jews to go back and rebuild their city and rebuild their country. And that recognition is Kiddusha, is called Kiddusha Sheniya, or the Kiddusha of Ezra, and its effect is much greater than the effect of Yehoshua, who through conquest sanctified the land. Because now, Kevan She'ela Ezra v'Kiddusha, that he came back and he sanctified the land, lo Kiddusha b'kibush, it wasn't through conquest, it was through this international, or call it diplomatic recognition of the state of Israel, or the land of Israel belonging to the Jewish people. Therefore, any area that was settled by those who came back from Bavel to resettle the land, ונתקדש בקדושת עזרא השנייה, and was sanctified or re-sanctified through Ezra during his period, הרי הוא מקודש היום. He says that still holds the sanctity of Eretz Israel, אף על פי שנלקחה הארץ ממנו, even though we were then conquered again and sent out to Galut, וחייב בשביעית ומעשרות על הדרך שביארנו בהלכות תרומה, and all those areas, it's mostly Judea, Samaria area, Jerusalem, right? All these areas that were held by Ezra and that second, called the second commonwealth of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, all those areas, you need to apply all the laws that are dependent upon Eretz Israel. So we see the Kiddusha of Ezra was even more, we call it even stronger or more valid or more powerful than that of Yehoshua, who came and conquered the land. Why? Because the second Kiddusha of Eretz Israel was by virtue of, we'll call it diplomatic recognition. It was recognized as our home and it was licensed to us. Okay? So we'll go back for a sec to Yerushalayim. One sec. I'm in the middle of the class. Oh, thank you. Okay, so let's go back to a sec to the Kiddusha of Yerushalayim. So if Kiddusha Rishona is dependent upon kibush, and once the land is conquered from you, it's annulled, and the rest of the country, however, it was annulled. Why specifically Yerushalayim is the only one that has whose Kiddusha Rishona wasn't annulled? Any ideas? the spiritual reason that was given to us here before, right, is because of the Shekhinah. However, that's not really a legal valid point. What does that mean? Because of the Shekhinah? Well, so we have Kiddusha that's dependent upon conquest. There's a higher level of Kiddusha to that, and that's, we'll call it international or diplomatic recognition. Okay? Now there's a higher level of, we'll call it title. What could be a higher level of title or something assigning you property that's even stronger than the international community or diplomatic recognition? Any ideas? What could be stronger?
Recognition from Moshe.
Teresa?
Oh, we say recognition from Hashem anyways, we have. We see that's not enough, because once we were conquered, it was gone. The laws that God gave us don't apply anymore to those areas. Any ideas? What could be stronger?
Is it to settle the land?
Sorry?
Is it to settle the land without war, without conquest?
Okay, settle the land without conquest.
Purchase?
But how do you get back? Sorry?
Is it
Rebecca, what'd you
purchase?
say?
Purchase?
Purchase, exactly. Purchase. In conquest, you're taking possession without any consent. Right? International recognition is the international community consents to you taking a possession of something, but maybe those who currently hold the title aren't, they don't consent to it. A purchase is the person who's currently holding the title is transferring the title to you. And that's actually what happened with Yerushalayim. Right? If we go to the Sefer Shemuel, the book of Samuel 2, we go to the end of the book actually. It says Vayan David Kidvar Gad Kasher Siva Hashem, right? And David went up according to God's instruction, and he went to Aravna, right? Vayashkef Asa Aravna, he looked forward and he saw the King David coming, and Aravna said, Madua ba Adoni HaMelech el Avdo, wherefore is my Lord the king comes to his servant. By the way, Aravna wasn't a servant, right? He was a king. He was the Jebusite king of Jerusalem. And King David said to him, to buy the threshing floor, to buy your threshing floor, to build an altar unto the Lord. He wants to build the Mizbeach in the place of the Mizbeach in the Mikdash. Right? There was a plague going on, and God said, you have to go and you have to buy this piece of land and build an altar over there, which is the place of the Mizbeach, and only then will the plague stop, that the plague may be stayed from the people. And Aravna said to David, let my lord the king take and offer up what seems good to him. Right? He says, take the land, it's yours. Well, does this sound familiar? This happened previously before with Abraham in Hebron. Right? He goes to what's his name? Hiti, Ephron. He wants to buy the cave of the Machpelah, and he says, take it, it's yours. And Abraham insists. He says, no, I want to purchase it. Right? He says, oh, this is Aravna, the king unto the king to David. And he said, and he says, Adonai Elohecha Yirsecha. Says, Vayomer HaMelech El Aravna, and King David says to Aravna, says, no, lo, ikano ekne me'otecha bimchi, but I will verily buy it of thee at a price. Neither will I offer burnt offering unto the Lord my God, which costs me nothing. He says, it's not gonna be a free service. I'm gonna buy the place. I'm going to buy everything on the place, the wood that's there, the stone that's there, and I'm going to build an altar on that place. And this was so even though King David actually previously conquered Jerusalem, you see that there were coexisting in Jerusalem two nations, the Jewish nation and the Yevusim and the Yevusi nation, and until King David came and purchased Temple Mount from the Jebusite king who previously had the title to it. Okay? And since then, Jerusalem's title has never transferred willingly or legally from the Jewish people to any other entity in the world. All right? So, 3 levels of Kedusha, which is 3 levels of called validity of title to the place. 1, the lowest level, is through conquest. If you go and conquer a land, you hold it, it's yours. However, once it's taken from you, it's gone. And this is how God recognizes it, because the laws that God gave us that apply to the land of Israel only apply if there's Kedusha in it, if we properly sanctified it. And if we lost it, it's gone. So that's the first level. The second level is international recognition. The third level is, which is higher than all of it, and we see this with Kedusha of Shlomo when he inaugurated the temple in Jerusalem, is because the title was through purchase. He purchased the title from whoever legally held the title before him. Okay? So that's the legal status of Jerusalem under Jewish law. How about under international law? So first of all, we see that it's not enough to say what's the legal status of Jerusalem under Jewish law, because Jewish law recognizes the international law. So in order for us to have Kedusha Eretz Israel, right, it's true, we did conquer the area, right, in 1948, and then we expanded that area in 1967. However, that's not the highest title. That's not the highest level of Kedusha. Under international law, people come to say, they want to say that we don't have a right to the land of Israel. So what does international law actually say? So let's go back to year 1917. We have the Balfour Declaration. Okay? Balfour Declaration, this is in 1917 in England. Who holds the title to Jerusalem at the time? Anyone know? I'll give you a hint.
Ottomans?
It's not us.
The
The
Ottoman
British.
Empire.
Ottoman Empire. Or
The
British.
Ottoman
Well, it was
Empire.
transferred to the
Exactly.
British. It was transferred to the British around that time, but before it was the Ottoman Empire, and then the British took it from the
So at
Ottomans.
this point, it's the Ottoman Empire. And what are the British saying? His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. By the way, these are vague terms. National home doesn't actually mean anything in international law. All right. Palestine is a well-known area of land, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Okay, meaning we have to preserve the civil right, not the civil rights, the human rights of people living in that land, in the land of Palestine. All right. What authority does His Majesty's government have in order to grant us Palestine as a national home? The truth is, none. Absolutely nothing. It's a nice declaration. They're recognizing that the land should be ours, and they're saying they view it with favor. If we were to establish a country, you know, it would make it'll make His Majesty smile and make him happy. All right. Does that have any kind of international or legal bearing? No, it has absolutely none. However, if we go a little bit further down, April 2020, you have the San Remo resolution. Anyone, are you familiar with the League of Nations? This is the previous, called the previous Gilgul of the United Nations. Before the United Nations, there was the League of Nations. All right, the League of Nations consisted of the 5 main allied forces of World War I. And now that all this land fell into them after winning World War I, defeating Germany and the Ottoman Empire, there's all this land and they need to figure out what to do. So what do? So first of all, now, who has the title to Jerusalem? The Ottoman Empire no longer exists. It's not there anymore. It's not the British who have the title, but the League of Nations, and they need to decide what to do. And so what they do is they officially recognize the Balfour Declaration, now giving it legal status. However, it has no actual legal definition, because what is a national home? And the League of Nations, they vote to give to establish a British mandate for Palestine. All right, what is a mandate for Palestine? So here, I put it here. The mandate for Palestine is part of a mandate system, a framework created to administer former Ottoman and German territories until they were deemed capable of self-rule. The mandate for Palestine wasn't a right that the British had. It was an obligation that they had. They received a mandate for Palestine. Who voted for this mandate for Palestine? All the 5 supreme allied forces and all the 51 member countries who were members of the League of Nations all unanimously voted in favor of recognition has hereby been given to the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine and to the grounds of reconstituting their national home in that country. Meaning now practically the entire world, the entire international community, who now holds the title to the land of Palestine, is recognizing the Jewish people's right to reestablish, right, not to constitute a country, to reconstitute their national home in that country, to establish a country in the boundaries of Palestine. Where is it? Here, in the boundaries of Palestine. And who is in charge of facilitating the land to make sure that we can grow to a place of self-governance and self-rule? Well, that's the British mandate. The British Empire was charged with making sure that the Jewish people can come and establish a country, an independent country, and they will hold the land until they transfer it to us once we're ready. Now, how well did the British comply with that obligation that they had? They were absolutely terrible. They did everything they can to prevent it from happening, to the point where even when they left the country, right, they left all their weapons in the hands of the Arabs in order to massacre and kill us. All that time during World War II, when Jews were trying to flee Europe and the Holocaust, the British closed the doors of the land of Israel, didn't let the Jewish people come. Until today, they do everything they can to undermine Jewish sovereignty of the state of Israel, and especially the West Bank. Because the West Bank, for some reason, right, in their opinion, doesn't fall under that legal obligation. And we'll see why. What's special about the West Bank? All right. So this was in 1920. However, 1922, post World War II, the British already made other promises to other countries, and they decided to cut off the whole Jordan part, right? The Transjordan, the whole mandate for Palestine actually included all of today's Jordan, today's Israel, today's West Bank, Gaza, and all of Jordan. However, they wanted to gift or award Jordan, the land of Jordan, to King Abdallah from, by the way, from Saudi Arabia. He's not even Jordanian or Palestinian. He is he's Saudi. The monarchy of Jordan today is actually, it's a Hashemite kingdom. It's a Saudi kingdom. And for his help in World War I, they awarded King Abdallah the portion of Jordan. By the way, that is completely against the international law. They had no right to do that because Palestine didn't belong to them. They didn't hold the title to Palestine. They were just charged with making sure we can establish a country in Palestine. We go a little bit further down, we get to 1947. There's the UN Resolution 181. It's a partition plan where the United Nations, this is the mandate for Palestine, is now coming to an end and need to figure out what's going to happen with Palestine. And we declared an independent country. But before that, right, there was a UN resolution to further cut down the Jewish portion of Palestine, which is everything here that's grayish, brownish, and everything in red would be an Arab state. However, the Arabs rejected this partition plan. It would only have legal effect if both sides would have agreed to it, voted in favor. It doesn't matter anymore what the rest of the nations say, because this is only concerning the Jews and the Arabs of Palestine. The Arabs rejected it, the Jews accepted it, and they said, we will establish a country, a Jewish country in the allocated part to the Jews. The Arabs rejected and invaded. And the result of that invasion was now that there's the state of Israel without Gaza and the West Bank. Gaza being in control of the Egyptians, and the West Bank was occupied by Jordan. By the way, the only illegal occupation of the West Bank was for 19 years by Jordan. Jordan had no rights to the West Bank. Jordan already had their own country, which they also unlawfully received. However, that's the extent of their land. And now that they invaded another sovereign country and occupied its territory. And this occupation wasn't recognized by any country in the world except for two. Can anyone guess who those two are? One of them just nominated Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. It was Pakistan and yours truly, the British government. So not only did the British do everything to prevent us from establishing our own country, even once we did and were invaded by Jordan, and they illegally occupied the entire West Bank, they're the only ones who recognized their occupation as legal. No one else in the world did, except for them in Pakistan. And then in 1967, we conquered all that land and Gaza and, well, much more, right? The entire Sinai and the Golan Heights.
Did any
All right.
country recognize the illegal occupation of Gaza by Egypt? Because Egypt illegally occupied Gaza as well. So did any
It's
country recognize?
it's different in the case of Gaza. Actually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That's a good question. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Probably the same. I'd say probably the same. Although it was kind of like Egypt, so it was never really like ours. In 1967, we took control of all of those areas, right? So, here, just want to show you some things. Here, this is, right, former president of the International Court of Justice in The Hague, the ICJ, right? State of Israel acting in lawful exercise of its right of self-defense may seize and occupy foreign territory as long as such seizure and occupation are necessary to its self-defense. All right, so this is what you could say about Gaza. When we occupied Gaza, why it would be legally ours, especially regarding the West Bank, right? This is, if we forget about everything that happened previously, and we accept that that was Jordan, even if we were to recognize the Jordanian occupation of the West Bank as legal, then in the case of the 6-Day War, Jordan opened war on us. It's true that we started the war, a preemptive strike in Egypt, but we were begging Jordan not to get involved, and they started shelling Jerusalem, and they started attacking us. And in self-defense, we had to conquer Jerusalem, the eastern Jerusalem, and the entire West Bank as well. So as long as such seizure and occupation are necessary to its self-defense, right? We were attacked by Jordan, we seized that land out of self-defense, where the prior holder, Jordan, of territory had seized that territory unlawfully. The state which subsequently takes that territory in the lawful exercise of self-defense, meaning us, Israel, who now conquered that land because of self-defense and we seize it, Israel has against the prior holder, Jordan, better title. It's our title. This is under international law. If we made territory gains in a defensive war, those territory gains are legally ours. If we were the aggressor and initiated the war, those territory gains are illegal. As between Israel acting defensively in 1948 and 1967, on the one hand, and her Arab neighbors acting aggressively in 1948 and 1967 on the other, Israel has better title in the territory of what was Palestine, including the whole of Jerusalem, than do Jordan and Egypt. So he's referring to also to Gaza over here, because those were seized in a defensive war. All right, so what's the status? What's the legal status of Jerusalem, of the state of Israel under international law? Well, first of all, once the title of Palestine, the land of Palestine, was forfeited or relinquished by the Ottoman Empire to the League of Nations, the League of Nations unanimously voted in favor of establishing a Jewish country state in the land of Palestine, in all of Palestine, which 77% of it was later partitioned and given away illegally to the Jordanians, where they established the country. And so one question here is, this is the League of Nations, said Remo. However, they don't exist anymore. Right now we have the UN. Right? So what happens once the League of Nations is dissolved? Does all the decisions that they make no longer take effect?
No, they're still valid. There's some sort of agreement in the UN that all of it becomes sort of like a law. It's not a resolution anymore. It's more like it has a higher status.
Right. So when the United Nations was established, it's called Article 80 of the United Nations Charter. Under Article 80, let's see if I have it here. I had it before. Here, Article 80 of the UN Charter, right? It's referred to as the Palestine Clause, but it doesn't, it's not, it was promoted, it was made sure by, Jewish legal minds to include it in order to safeguard the status of Palestine as a Jewish state, right? But it's really for concerning all of the League of Nations previous decisions. Basically, under Article 80 of the UN Charter, they are ratifying all the, or they're accepting all the agreements that were already made by the League of Nations. So anything that was already set as international law by the League of Nations is now incorporated into the UN Charter, and the United Nations has to follow it. And the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, right? This is the law that they need to judge according to. So under international law, right? Don't be fooled by anything they tell you on the news or the media. This is the international law. The international law is that the Jewish people alone have the rights to establish a state in the land of Palestine. We are the only ones who have a right to a political leadership and entity. The Arabs under Palestine or within the boundaries of the state, right? The humanitarian rights need to be recognized. However, there is nothing recognizing them, promising them some form of statehood. They have no political rights in Palestine. Their political rights are in the Arab side, which is Jordan. They can be citizens of Jordan. They can vote. If they want civil rights, they should get that from Jordan and not from the state of Israel. We have no
Sami?
obligation to grant them civil rights. Yes.
Sami, just a quick question. So how did it historically evolve that 2 million plus Arabs do have Israeli citizenship? Like, how did that all happen?
So
If they're supposed to be Jordanian citizens, why are they Israeli citizens?
In 1948, in 1948, when the partition plan went from this to what we actually took control of, there were many Arabs there. And we granted them citizenship. So anybody who wanted to receive Israeli citizenship, we granted them citizenship. We didn't have to. Under international law, we didn't have to. But we did. And that's the status now. And we can't just revoke it. Right? However, all the other Arabs in Gaza and in the West Bank, but by the way, most Arabs of the West Bank, up until let's say one generation ago, they all had Jordanian passports and citizenship. And there's absolutely no reason for us to accept them as Israeli citizens. If they want citizenship, they want statehood, let them go to Jordan. 80% of Jordan is Palestinians, right? It's ruled by Saudis, but that's the Palestinian state. Any Palestinian who wants a Palestinian state should go to Jordan. It's not going to be here.
Isn't it always also the case that the Arabs that have Israeli citizenship today are the descendants of, or the Arabs that did not raise up arms against Israel during the 48 Liberation War? So those were the Arab cities that did not go against Israel. they stayed out of the war, or they were on Israel's side on the war?
Some did. Some did. Some were peaceful. Some we got along well with. By the way, many of the lands that the Jews hold prior to the War of Independence, they were purchased. Right? There was a keren. It's called Keren Kayemet L'Israel, the Jewish National Fund, where people were donating. Jews throughout the entire world were donating money to the Jewish National Fund, and the Jewish National Fund purchased lands throughout the entire country. So they have no claim, like no claim at all. Even if we hadn't purchased land, it's enough that it was granted to us, right? And once they invaded us and we conquered it, that's it. The game's over. Game's over. We legally held it even without the conquest. And the conquest just made sure that we're holding on to it. But even without all that, most of these lands we purchased. And still today, there's many Jews trying to purchase lands, by the way, that legally, right, are Jewish owned. Apartments in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank, right, and in Hebron. Even though we should have title to it, they're still going and purchasing. What happens to Arabs who sell? Well, if they get found out by the Palestinian Authority, they get killed.
Sami, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Because I also heard the argument that the conquering of land stopped after World War II, so that doesn't go anymore.
What does that mean?
That means if Israel was to take over or claim control over Gaza, West Bank, or any other territory that didn't belong to them before the Second World War, it doesn't count anymore. Even if they took it by war, by conquest, by winning a war.
Yeah, but that's where the differentiation comes in. Is it a defensive war or an offensive war? And this land was already awarded to us prior. This is post World War I, not World War II. Right? It's true that how do you call it? The mandate ended in 1948. This is already after World War I, and the partition plan, or 1947. That's when we declared a state in the territory that was already awarded to us by the League of Nations. There shouldn't have been a need for conquest to begin with. However, the British did everything to prevent the Jewish people from establishing the state, to the point of even trying to actively give the Arabs an advantage in a war, right? That should have resulted in a complete massacre of the Jewish people here. But to the dissatisfaction or not, we prevailed, and we conquered these lands in a defensive war. But these are lands that under international law really belong to us. We held the title to it, even though practically speaking, we couldn't actually hold it. If the Arabs wouldn't have invaded, this is what the state of Israel would have looked like. The red would have been an Arab state, and the rest would have been a Jewish state. Or the red would have been Arab settlements, and the rest would have been a Jewish state. And the Jews never would have conquered them. We never would have conquered them. We never would have started a fight with them. We just wanted to live in our land peacefully. Oh, by the way, even in this era, you see Jerusalem is marked out special. Jewish state, Arab state, this is an international zone. It wasn't meant to be held by any one state, according to the resolution. Even though legally it was really ours.
I have a question too. You said before, if I
Yes.
understood correctly, that
the plan, the 1947 plan, was never realized because, you need both sides to realize it, and the Arabs rejected it.
Right.
So when
Right.
we declared in 1948, when we declared independence, wasn't that then illegal? Or am I wrong?
No, because this resolution further limits what was already accepted as international law, meaning when we declared the state, why do I have a little bit of here? When we declared the state, we accepted the boundaries of that partition plan. However, we were legally entitled to everything here in white. That was the previous agreement under international law. If the Arabs would agree to it, and since we agreed to it ourselves, then this would have replaced the previous allocation.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
A
So
question.
really, like, thank God for us that they didn't accept it.
Sami, a question.
Yes.
Isn't it so? I heard Natasha Hausdorff, and she's a lawyer in international law. She talked about when the British left the British mandate of Palestine. Since they left the administrative purposes. So according to international law, when an entity that is controlling a land mass leaves it, whoever has the administrative keys and tools to take over that landmass, they get the entire portion within the borders of the previous administrators, like the previous borders. So when the Brits left, the Jews were the only ones that have the administrative capacity to administer the land. So that's why it belongs to us under international law, and the Arabs did not, because they wanted the pan-Arabism. Is that also what you have?
I'm not familiar with that argument. I'm not familiar with that law. It could be true. I don't know. However, the mandate of Palestine was that the British were meant to ensure that we have that administrative power to begin with. That they were meant to facilitate the Jewish people building themselves up into a state, which we managed to do kind of, I wouldn't say without them, I'd say despite everything they were doing to prevent that from happening. So in summary, there's 3 levels of Kiddusha. And when I say Kiddusha here, let's say validity of the title to a certain area of land. One, we'll start with the lowest, is through conquest, all right, which is not recognized by international law, but it's not really recognized by law. It's recognized by, facts on the ground. However, that only applies as long as you're actually holding the land. Once it's conquered from you, it's gone, it's invalid, to the point where laws, we'll call it mitzvot shetuluyot ba'aretz, that are dependent on the land of Israel, it's not even considered the land of Israel anymore. The second level is, call it international recognition, the international community, all right, which I hope I made the case applies to the entire land of Israel, really applies under international law to all of Jordan too. However, there's a state there, we kind of forfeit that right, and whatever. This is what we have. This is what we're left with now. It definitely applies to all of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. There is no real justification for us to not apply full sovereignty to the West Bank and really annex it, it's not even annex, it's just apply Israeli law to the entire West Bank. Regarding the questions of the Arabs there, we have no obligation to give them civil rights, to make them citizens of Israel. If they want to be citizens of any country, let them go to Jordan. Jordan's their country. However, we're not allowed to drive them out under international law. It's kind of like a missed opportunity because in 1948, all the Arab countries drove out all the Jewish populations. That would have been the best time to have a population transfer. You kick all the Jews out, we'll kick all the Arabs out of this area. That's it, story's over. That's kind of like a missed opportunity. A higher level is that of Jerusalem and the Mikdash, right? Because those were actually purchased. That was a consensual transfer of title from those who legally held the title to the new party who now acquired the title, right? By the way, it's not just Jerusalem. There's also Hebron, right? Was purchased. Shechem, which is like or Kever Yosef, which is in the midst of Shechem, was also purchased, right? So that's the highest level. Now, if you look throughout the entire history of the land of Israel, especially Jerusalem, the only time the title of Jerusalem was transferred legally from one party to another was when we purchased the land, when King David purchased Jerusalem. Since then, it's been forcefully taken out of our hands by the Babylonians, or then by the Romans, right? And then, you know, from the Romans, it was the Byzantines, and then there was how do you call it? There was the Muslims, and then the Ottomans, right? There's a few other stages in between that I'm skipping, right? But then the Ottoman Empire dissolved, right? It's no longer. That title, which the Ottomans held not really legally, transferred to the League of Nations, and they recognized, same as the Persian king, they recognized our rights, because it's not, they don't need to grant us the title is ours, it's always ours, right? It's undisputed because we're the only ones who ever acquired it legally. They recognized our right to the land, and they mandated British Empire to facilitate our establishing of a country in our homeland, right? And then, you know, we had to defend it with our lives and conquer it and expand it within the boundaries that were allocated to us to begin with. All right, so that's briefly the status of Jerusalem and Israel under Jewish law, which recognizes international law, and under international law. I hope I made the case for Jerusalem. Any questions? Okay, so if we addressed everything, I hope it was clear. I hope if anyone ever challenges you on under international law, what we're doing is illegal, we shouldn't be here, we're colonizing the Middle East, you'll know how to answer them. And most important, you'll understand that we didn't take anything that wasn't ours, right? This is our land. It's always been our land. It's always been recognized internationally as our land. And the only ones who dispute that are people who want to destroy us.
Thank you, Sami.